Hello, and welcome everyone to our very first LinkedIn Live session in 2024. My name is Mark. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm responsible for strategy, innovation, and ventures at Karger Publishers, and I will be your host and moderator of today. And today's session is about how AI is changing the landscape and the game of scientific publishing. And joining me is Patrick Starke, co-founder and CEO of imagetwin, and also Benjamin Dodsworth, CSO and also co-founder of PIPRA. Now, both of these gentlemen and their companies have won the Vesalius Innovation Award in 2022 and 2023, respectively. So, gentlemen, congratulations again. And of course, you've guessed it, both have major AI components in their offerings. So that's why we're here. And sneakily, I'll do a little bit of a sneak peek of the award and self-promotion, but very, very short, I promise. But nevertheless, to those of you listening in, might not know what the Vesalius Innovation Award is. The award is an opportunity for startups and young entrepreneurs in the field of healthcare to showcase their ideas. And our award recognizes and celebrates achievements in medical innovation and providing a great exposure for applicants and a possibility to bring their ideas to the next level. And I hope both participants today can confirm that. And the important part here is to note that we will reopen application phase in summertime, so keep an eye out for that. But now to the core of the matter, and maybe Benjamin, you can start us off with who you are and what it is that PIPRA is doing.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I can definitely recommend the prize. It's a fantastic event. And yeah, I'm Dr. Benjamin Dodsworth. I'm a Chief Science Officer and co-founder of PIPRA. And yeah, I mean, my background is in academia, so I'm a scientist by training. So I've published a lot in peer-reviewed journals. I'm a reviewer, and yeah, and as a startup in the medical field, publishing is very important to us as well. And yeah, just shortly, my background is that before co-founding PIPRA, I worked in big pharma as well as doing my PhD at the University of Oxford and a postdoc. And yeah, then I co-founded PIPRA with my two brilliant co-founders. So I'm like the science guy, and I have a medical co-founder, Nayeli, and a business co-founder, John. And together we decided to tackle a very big problem in healthcare, which is called delirium. And you might not have heard of delirium, but it's huge. It costs more to healthcare than diabetes. And you might not have heard it directly, but you probably have heard someone say, you know, let's say grandmother or my uncle, since her fall or her surgery, hip surgery or whatever, she was never the same person. I don't know, Mark, maybe you've heard someone.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is usually because of delirium, right? And delirium is, you can get it in hospital. You're there for a surgery or for, COVID. Affects mostly older people, and it's like dementia-like symptoms. So a lot of confusion, but on top of that, it's also things like hallucinations. So patients, they often experience monsters that come out of the walls, or they have delusions about the staff that are trying to kill them. These kind of things are incredibly scary, an awful experience. You get patients who, have PTSD afterwards and never want to go into a hospital again. And it does resolve, after a couple of days to weeks. But the really scary thing is the long-term effects. So it increases mortality, it increases dementia risk. In fact, so this is the number that scares me the most. So I have co-panelists, so this is perfect. So Patrick, what do you think the likelihood of dementia, a new dementia diagnosis, is after you have a case of delirium? So in the year after delirium, how much does your dementia risk go up? Patrick, you think?
Good one. I would say maybe like 10%.
Yeah. Mark?
I would go higher. I would say like 30 or 40% even, because it's quite a significant.
And those are scary numbers, right? But the reality is 1,400%. Exactly. So you really don't want to have delirium, right? And the crazy thing is that we already know, for the last 30 years, we know how to tackle this problem. So the only thing that actually does work and is really uncontroversial, works very well, is prevention. But the problem with these preventive measures is they're very manual, so they require a lot of time. It's non-pharmacological, so nurses, anesthetists, everyone involved in the care requires more time with the patient, and especially nurses who has extra time. No one has time. So we decided this is perfect for AI, because what we've built is essentially it plugs into the electronic health record system of a hospital, and when a patient comes in, we assess what is the risk of this patient to get delirium. And if they're above a certain threshold, we actively tell the people who have to do the preventive measures, that this patient needs them, right? So rather than passively expecting a patient, your staff to treat all patients, you get really targeted, and that improves things. And it works very well. In fact, so well that the last implementation, we saved the hospital around 4 million Swiss francs a year because of that. Just to wrap it up, as a company in healthcare doing AI, we need to publish a lot of peer-reviewed publications to be taken seriously. And I think that's probably why I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always mentioned, I mean, the impact is huge, and I can immediately see just from the time-saving aspect of knowing who to target or who to look for is a huge game changer in itself in hospital care, where that shifts long and the understaffed and all of that. So we dig a bit deeper into what the algorithm does. But maybe let's give Patrick the stage next, as and also an equally challenging task in publishing. Patrick, maybe over to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. So I'm Patrick. I'm one of the two founders of imagetwin, and together with my colleague Marcus, around 2.5 years ago, we founded the company now called imagetwin, and we are focusing on detecting integrity issues, special focus on images in scientific papers. And even so, most of our scientist colleagues are very good scientists, don't cheat, make everything in a perfect way. There are always some cases where unfortunately that's not happening. And for text plagiarism, for example, there are good solutions out there for many, many years. But for images, it's still done complete manually. And the potential risk, what can happen if you don't identify issues, I think it's shown in different cases. But for example, when we talk about Alzheimer, there were medicine that has been developed based on faulty studies where manipulated images played a major role. So there were hundreds of millions of dollars wasted just for research that was never true. And if you would have the correct facts, you would not have done it. So, and that's something where we have popped in, because in the last decade, I would say mainly it was done manually. And now we found a solution that we can use AI to optimize this process, so we can identify inappropriate manipulations, duplications in many figure types, including Western blots, microscopic images, but many more. And I think what makes the software really special is that we are not only looking for issues inside a paper, so compare if image figure 1 and figure 2 have issues, but also we can compare it against a huge database of over 50 million images. So you will know if the image in a manipulated or in the original way has ever been used somewhere else before. And by that, we were able to identify thousands of unethical papers. And I think by that, we are helping to make just the science a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I think the question I will come to for imagetwin is, of course, the arms race with AI generating images, not specifically only in medical, but I'm sure there are applications for that. But then also, of course, how to cut up with that, and that's a thing that we might have a look at. But there's also time for me to encourage all of our viewers. If you have any questions regarding AI and how it's being used, or just a general view from those two gentlemen here present, then please let us know, and we'll make sure, try our best to incorporate all of that and get that answered as well. So for my side, Benjamin, I've already mentioned the algorithm itself is something that that is quite fascinating, because it used to be a spreadsheet analysis as well in most cases, right? Where people try to find what delirium could mean for a patient, or which patients are sort of at risk. So tell us a bit more about how you incorporated these individual patient metadata with the hospitals. And I'm also quite impressed by how you sort of individualize it per hospital. Like you almost customize it in a way, if you don't mind me saying that, for each of your customers. So how did you go about that with AI?
Yeah, actually, the approach is a perfect example of how publishing is also important, because we didn't just want to create a tool. We wanted to create the tool that we all can agree on. This works everywhere, and that's, of course, a big challenge, because you've got researchers who've been working their entire careers towards delirium research, and then we pop up and we say, hey, now everyone should use this, right?
The holy grail.
Exactly. And that would be a little bit arrogant as well, let's be honest. So what we did was interesting. It was actually during COVID as well. So we had a clinical trial planned, multi-center, to collect data. And we wanted to supplement that with other data that we could find. But when COVID hit, we were forced to stop every non-COVID related research. So we couldn't do the trial. Luckily, we were also looking at another route. And we did what's called an individual participant data meta-analysis, which is a mouthful. But basically, it's basically what we did is we systematically identified every paper that collected the data that we were interested in. So delirium outcome and factors that could lead to delirium. And then we requested the data from all of these hundreds of studies, which was a huge effort, but it was also very successful, because the people who work in delirium also realize, it's a problem that needs to be solved, right? So we collated all this data from all around the world into a big database, and built the tool from that, basically. And that approach is nice, because it means that those researchers who have spent their entire career on it, they contribute to it, right? It's no longer this tool from these newcomers. It is the consensus tool. And yeah, in the meantime, we're supplementing that with data that we get from different hospitals as well.
And that's actually a brilliant segue also to what the crisis that imagetwin is currently tackling with falsification, and I mean the entire research integrity crisis in a way that has been a huge bubble in the last couple of years. One can only imagine what happens if falsified research or falsified end results end up in part of these meta-analyses. And I mean, you could start with the input, and if something has been falsified in there, then it completely derails the algorithm in the end. So maybe Patrick, then the question to you about this arms race is how do you how do you go about it with AI? Why is AI so important? You mentioned manual label. Of course, we all understand that it is too labor intensive to do this manually. So how did you go about tackling this?
I think on the one side, it's too labor intense to do all that work, because it takes hours for each paper you want to check manually. And also on top of it, there are just some issues you won't be able to find. So there are always like situations where a human is much better in identifying a specific problem, and there are others by comparing it against like massive databases. It's impossible for a human to do that. So what we did is that we looked into basically any reported case of research integrity based on images that happened in the past. So we looked into all relevant examples, tried to get from all the experts around, from like websites like PubPeer, to get every information to be able to get, and then like put it into like a big database and analyze it. And for years we played around like finding the perfect algorithm, and unfortunately it's not one algorithm for everything. It's different algorithms for different image types that we are now able to, even like with a high probability, to say, okay, this image is problematic or not. And then in the end, the human has to make the final call to say, yeah, we have to say, okay, this paper, we cannot publish this because we have high concerns about the integrity, and imagetwin can give you, like, if it's a high probability recommendation, here might be a big problem, and then the human has to put it into context.
Yeah.
And by combining these two powers, I think it can be a super helpful tool. And we are like, there were studies where like scientists used the software and tried to find everything by himself. And even there we saw, okay, the software was not like faster by a factor like 100 or something, but also identified more issues. Of course, there's some specific cases where the human is better, but both together, this is like the perfect idea.
Mm-hmm. And it also sums up in a way, because you both have completely different approaches. Of course, one targeting the patient and one targeting the publishing industry, but it sums up the effect it has. It highlights areas where you need to pay attention and where an expert can have a much more bigger impact. So it's actually quite nice to have that. And for me, it's interesting. You chose AI to enhance in a way what you have in terms of data, in terms of analysis. So my question would be to both of you, what's next? So what's next in your own personal pipeline, and how do you see that shift? So at the moment, it could be 50-50, like you highlight, and then a doctor has a closer look, or a nurse has a closer look, or a peer reviewer, a professional at the publishing has a closer look. But is it likely going to shift, or would you like it to stay? Like, what are your thoughts in terms of development?
Mm-hmm.
And, so, and maybe, Patrick, go ahead.
Okay, I get started.
Just throw it in the room.
Of course. So for us, it's the most important part that it's as easy as possible for the user, for the reviewer to use it. And of course, reducing false positives and everything is a major task. So if we can make it happen that with the highest probability possible, we can identify the issue. And also we are now working on, in the beginning it was just identifying if there's like a high probability of, or high similarity of two images. And now we're also getting into the context, and we can say, okay, there's a high similarity, but that's because it's the overlay of the other image. So we can put it more and more into context, so that we make it what a human also is doing, like the easy tasks we take away, which is time consuming, and make it much more efficient. And I think that's so that you have like, maybe now you have like an 80% probability that what we found might be an issue. And of course, if we bring it up to 95%, then that's so much easier, because you can save time, and you can implement it in a very early stage in the review process, that you can say, not only if we might have any suspicion here, but every single paper will be checked, and then we can sort out everything. And as you talked before about the arms race, of course, on the other side, people are using AI. So we saw first papers where like where it was shown that you can completely AI generated microscopic images, scale bands. You can just create them, like we have in our, because we are working on the topic, we can now create very realistically looking Western blots where I don't see a difference anymore. And if we can do it, I don't think we are the only one on the planet who are able to do that. And so we have to work on facing that part, because the more sophisticated the technology on the bad side is coming, the harder it will be for a human without any technical support to see it. And all the published publications are only worth what's in there and if everything is correct. But if you, I know scientists who try to reduce the study and say, I was not able, I worked there for a year and it was not possible. And 2 years later, this publication has been rejected, has been put offline because it was faulty, it was manipulated. So you don't want base a year of your work to reproduce a retracted paper. So and it's good if we do it later on, but if we can do that it's not even published, we can save so much resources, so much time of people who could do much more good stuff with the time.
I'm super happy, Patrick, that you're on this panel as well, because I was thinking beforehand, what am I going to talk about? And one of the things that I am most worried about with AI in the publishing space, let's say, is exactly that, is the amount of fake papers that might come out. And interestingly, when I was working at Big Pharma, they have this principle. So I came in as an academic from academia, and they have this principle: we don't believe anything that's published until we've reproduced it. We don't believe it. And I when I arrived, I thought that was borderline insulting. I've been creating all this work to then be told, no, we don't believe it until we've done it ourselves. But it just shows how big the problem is, right? And I'm really glad that you're working on that.
And it's crazy, man. You cannot try to reproduce every single paper you read. So at some point you need trust, but if now reality is showing that we should not trust too much, so we need some kind of ways to do it. And when you talk about hospitals, medicine, there's life on stake. And there were recommendations for medicine based on untrue results out of papers. And it's a nightmare. So we have to do something about it.
Yeah, it's a downward spiral. As the output is growing, with 40, 50, 60, 100 million papers a year in the next couple of years, maybe 5 years time, that's just making things worse. On the one hand, it's much more research getting done, but then if it's not verified, or if there is even a doubt that it has potential for falsification, then it of course, as you mentioned, Benjamin, it undermines the work of the researchers that they're doing their job and that are very passionate about finding solution to those problems. And it also undermines then what the end user experiences, whether it's medication, the new drug development, whether it's personal care and personal treatment, which is now in pharma's mind everywhere. So it's I think it's something that we can only sort of tackle together. And it's also interesting for both of you to hear that your pipeline is meant to further hone your skills, to improve and update the game, and not something that is spectacularly changing and now everything is automated. Because I get these conversations sometimes where people fear that they're being replaced or that their job will look completely different, and that's not even on the radar for entrepreneurs such as yourself. You want to make a completely different impact, and I think that vision is that perception from people and the reality is quite interesting to hear from you directly.
I think it's more about making a job of a review of an editor easier, more efficient, and not taking it away. I think this should never be situations where an AI solution makes a decision. So it can only give recommendation, and in the end, it's always a human. And if I'm happy if I could do my job in maybe a little bit faster, or a little bit more outcome. So everything that makes my life easier, I take every opportunity. If it's AI to optimize my text, to make my writing faster, or every possibility I can get, I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and similarly, I realize that I didn't fully answer your question, Mark, of what next.
the next.
It is exactly on those lines. So another big problem that we are actually addressing now is that most cases of delirium are not diagnosed. So 70% of cases are missed or misdiagnosed. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to essentially build something that can also diagnose delirium, either using existing data, or we're also looking at wearables and other data that comes in through the hospital. But it's exactly this. It's exactly trying to not replace the nurse or the physician, but taking away a task that's forgotten or deprioritized or that you don't have time for, and still getting to a result. And if anything, we are more dependent on than the nurse, for example, reacting to the information we give.
And I think we are far away from a lack of there's a lack of doctors, of nurses, and also of reviewers.
Yep.
So I think it's far away from the side that it can replace it. It just maybe making the problem and the lack a little bit smaller.
Yeah, I agree. It's just one, I think, more or less common misconception about AI and how it's being used. But there might be things that you've encountered when you talk about what your companies do, and people asking you, oh, that's interesting. Like, what do you do? Fully automated X, Y, Z. So maybe you can tell us a bit about this misunderstandings that you face now that we're on the topic of it, and tell us, like, how do you then answer that and try to find a way back on track of what we're actually doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest, it's less misunderstandings and more people who haven't, read our papers or looked into how we arrived at at our product. But often we get this black box question, right? AI, we don't understand where the results come from. That's scary. Or sometimes we, has it been validated? These kind of questions. And they're not misconceptions, actually. Those are very valid questions that we've addressed. So whenever we give a recommendation, we also generate kind of a small explanation as to where the result comes from. So this patient has a high risk, and they have a high risk because they had a delirium in a past stay, and their blood value, CRP, is elevated. So therefore, this is a high-risk patient. And we've documented that all in our publications, and so it's an easy thing to clear up, where we can just answer by saying it's not a black box. We've got it very transparently, and also you can read how we developed the algorithm in this peer-reviewed publication.
Yeah. And then you get the certification, not for nothing, I suppose, for the algorithm. That's also worth mentioning here.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that, but yes, we're certified as a medical device, and that doesn't come from nowhere.
Yeah, and everyone who's working on patents and different regulations with different offices and countries, you might imagine how hard it is to get that. So we'll skip that maybe for another day. But then over
a
to
whole
you,
panel on it.
Yeah, exactly. For you, Patrick, as I see, we're close to the end already, but maybe do you also get the black box question, I suppose?
Yeah, of course. So people are always interesting. How does it work? And I try to my best to explain it, but to a certain stage, it's then going so much into details that it's not really being easy to explain how the software works, and especially if you run different algorithms. But in the end, I think it's all about the data you get. So the data structure you have, how good the data is you have, that's like how good your AI can be. Because I think, of course, you try to make like a neutral, unbiased artificial intelligence, but it's only as good as the data you have. So that's also maybe important to know for everyone, that it's like for example, in publishing sector, and when we share like data, share results, we can make all our work better. and it should not be the black box where you just say, okay, something goes in and I don't have an idea of what's happening here, but it should be explainable. And of course, we put a lot of effort in making everything correct, that it's as unbiased as possible. But of course, from time to time, there might be smaller issues, but then we can fix it. So it's not that the system has like an issue and it will take it on forever. We can intervene there, that we can make it better or make it more sophisticated. And it will never be the same. Like every month, this AI gets better. So it's a continuous improvement. And I think that's always important to know that what you have now in 2 years, it will be completely different approach and hopefully much better.
Yeah, I think that's a very important that both of you mentioned, that transparency, that if you let the public know via the publication and via this peer review system and all that is happening behind the scenes of publishing, then you have that trust building, not only in the algorithm itself, but the entire approach and how data is being generated and where it's from, and then that constant improvement is an improvement rather than just more data sort of cluttering and even watering down the results of the original intention. So that's very interesting. Yeah, so we're almost out of time, but last but not least, I would like to maybe go back a little to your award-winning season, last season. Maybe both of you can just do a quick statement of the visionaries, and we've talked about it backstage a bit, how this has changed for you and what the experience has been like, and maybe we can animate a few listeners and watchers to apply for this year as well and get the same experience.
Okay, yeah, I think I can just say to every young startup, do it. It's like, it was so helpful for us. It was, especially as we are working in the publishing sector, that was really the best platform I could imagine for like getting attention for our software, for our solution. The whole process, it was interesting to meet the other startups. You had a great mentoring organized there. And for us, we just started, we launched our product just a few months before. And so it was a perfect kickstart. So all the attention we got from it, and people who heard about it and wanted to start conversations. And it was really a great possibility to speed up everything. And I think we would be not where we are at the moment if we did not get all this attention at the Visionaries Award. So thanks for organizing that, Marc.
That's many thanks to the team as well. If you're watching, that's congratulations to you.
Yeah, and Patrick, I mean, I can just mirror that exactly. I mean, it was fantastic. The process was great. We learned a lot. It was very useful. And then as a winner as well, actually the support you get then, and as you say, all the attention and everything was just really fantastic, and massively exceeded our expectations. So I can recommend that. It's worth applying for sure.
Thank you very much. That is a statement from both of you. It's encouraging. So thank you very much to everyone listening. Thank you to my panelists. I know I think there are topics and questions we could go down rabbit holes and talk about it for another 2 hours. But I think it was informative to a listener, as it was for me. It was a pleasure to have you here. And everyone listening in, stay tuned. We have more LinkedIn Live sessions on different topics. So watch out on our social media channels. And again, to both Patrick and Benjamin, thank you very, very much for your time. And I appreciate you taking this day to answer all of our questions on how AI is changing the game in publishing.
Thanks for inviting us.